Hello. So good to be here this afternoon. I'm in sunny Arizona. This is our initial Tango Wisdom Virtual Summit discussions on community. And today I'm privileged to have Bonnie Gintis with us. I originally had asked Bonnie to join this conversation because I'm a longtime lover of continuum movement. And I know Bonnie is a well-respected continuum movement teacher around the United States, and I'm sure she's actually taught in other places around the world as well, and is a retired osteopath. And so in order to bring a broader perspective to the idea of tango and community, I thought it would be an interesting concept to bring in Bonnie to discuss the three anatomies that Emily Conrad has discussed and set the foundation for continuum movement. And so these three anatomies, to me, go hand in hand with the idea of staying connected to the floor, staying connected to the partner, and staying connected to the music. And so Bonnie will hopefully enlighten us to how we can approach tango from a grander perspective to just get more out of it, both for ourselves and for our community and for the betterment of our lives, in a sense. So welcome, Bonnie. It's a privilege to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this fabulous summit.
Absolutely.
To talk about all of the things I love in my life. Tango, continuum movement, just living an aware, embodied life. And this model that we're going to be talking about of these three anatomies. First, let me just say that anything we say it is, it can't be, because it's not the words, it's the experience of all of these things. And I realize that these three categories we're about to talk about in a very meaningful way are somewhat artificial. And it's not one or the other. All three are happening all the time. But I'll describe each one of them, and I'll explain how I've experienced my own personal tango dancing and being part of a tango community or struggling in tango community, how viewing these three anatomies has allowed me to navigate that territory with a little bit more grace. So the first anatomy I consider, we call the personal anatomy. So in the personal anatomy, it includes everything that's about us as individuals. So it's me, Bonnie, my body, it's my culture, the family I grew up in, it's the social order that we live in, and it's things that we primarily sense from outside of our bodies that influence us in this realm. So when I think about that in terms, well, maybe I'll describe all three first, and then I'll relate them to tango. The second anatomy I call the biological anatomy. And here, you and I are both humans. We have the same biological experiences. So these are about the laws of nature, the way the natural world influences all living beings in the same way, regardless of who we are or what country we come from or who our dance teacher was or what style we say we dance. It's about the primordial developmental forces that formed us and keep us adapting and healing throughout our life. And the third anatomy is the cosmic anatomy. So this is whatever the bigger picture is that we connect to outside of ourselves or outside of just another person. It's the way we have a sense of connection to all of humanity, or we feel our existence in the order of the universe, you know, a speck on the planet Earth in a spiral-shaped galaxy, in a universe that's greater than we can imagine. So it's these three levels of, I mean, they're more like lenses. They're three lenses that I view my experience through that I can relate to my tango life. So for me, this personal anatomy shows itself in tango in your first category, which includes which starts with the floor, but you include the self, the body, technique, culture, codes, traditions, values, and the past. So that's all of the cultural messages that come with the dance, and then all of the specifics of how my body learns the technique of how to do this dance, how your body learns the technique of how to do this dance, and then how we come together and mechanically how we move with this very specific language. So, I mean, tango to me is a movement language, and we all have to learn to speak that language in order to speak it together. And that's a very personal process. Now, my experience is that if it ends there, or if it just stays in being viewed through that lens, that can make a tango community very hierarchical according to people's levels of experience, where the more experienced dancers don't want to dance with somebody less experienced than them, or people get defensive of some cultural concept. They want to try to make Vermont or Arizona like Argentina, and I always ask them, well, what year are we trying to make this like in Argentina when someone tries to do that? Because I know a lot about the history of tango, and if we're dancing in Argentina in the 1800s, it's very different than if we're dancing there in 1910 or today. So all of that to me is personal cultural information. And I feel like, although it's necessary, because that's how we come into community and learn a common language, it can also put us in a box if we just stay there. So, so then the biological anatomical view of things comes in. And this, I have to say, is one of my favorite lenses to view the whole world. I feel like my identity as an individual gets to relax and be a little blurred. And if I think about the like the biological aspects of how we connect and we communicate, it's not so much about me as a personal individual when I'm dancing with somebody. It's like we're two humans trying to figure out how to communicate in this totally nonverbal way, which is foreign to most of the cultures we come from. So how do we sense intention in another person? How do we both receive and transmit intention? And to me, that's more of a biological process than a personal process. So in your model, that second layer of consideration was the partner. So I feel like the way we relate to our partner, to me, is more biological than personal. Now, for some people, I'm sure it's quite personal, and it can be. But when I'm dancing at a milonga, I feel like I'm looking for humans to connect with. I'm not looking for individuals. And to me, it's a very biological, very primordial experience of opening up my perceptual field to, you know, how as an organism I'm going to resonate with another organism and move together. So that involves, you know, listening and following. I mean, to me, these are biological, neurological events. And and although individuals may have styles that they do them, as humans, we all do those things because we have the same basic circuitry. So it's helpful for me to let go and blur my individual identity and just be a part of the larger human community when I'm connecting with someone to dance. I frequently have made jokes with people that to me, tango is a mindfulness-based embodied contemplative practice. And whenever I say that to somebody and they enjoy what I've said, I know that I've found a kindred spirit. And most of the time people look at me like they have no idea what I'm talking about. I have quite a meditation background, and my years of meditation, I can tell you that you can go off to a 10-day meditation retreat and sit on a cushion And you can fake it part of the time. You can sit on your cushion looking like you're meditating, and you can be thinking about dinner or what you're going to do when you get home next week. You can fall asleep. But when you're dancing tango, if you blink, the dance is over. So to me, this dance is the ultimate challenge to be mindful. And that's a very deep, profound, contemplative practice. And I think that people who dance in a more mechanical fashion, where they rely more on memorized step sequences, or they have habits of certain things they do a certain way all the time, and they have certain people they dance with because they know their moves. You can have a perfectly delightful dance, but it's back in the personal realm. So I feel like this biological realm really encourages improvisation and spontaneity, and the ability to be attentive and responsive happens in this realm. So, so the third lens is through what I call the cosmic anatomy. And to me, this is about the interconnectedness of everything that transcends individuals or biology and goes to a bigger picture. So, so to me, in your model, the music being this third thing, the music to me is the symbol of something greater than us. So when we're dancing and we connect to the music, we're no longer one individual dancing with another individual. We're reaching out across time to where the music came from, the people who created music, and it's it gives us a chance of feeling part of something that crosses time and space. I've spoken to many people who feel like they have some kind of a spiritual experience on a peak tango night, and I think this is why. I think they've tapped into this cosmic realm. So once you've connected with your partner and you've connected to the music, there's all of the couples on the dance floor connecting with each other. There's that sort of cosmic movement around the dance floor, which to me is kind of like the movement of galaxies in the universe. So I feel like the milonga becomes a microcosm of what's actually happening in our whole cosmos. So I literally mean cosmic. I'm not being new agey about it. I'm just making the box that, you know, that big. I'm just expanding the container infinitely. So also in this realm are the things that don't have names in the material world, like something that's more energetic or spiritual. A lot of what exists in this realm, we just don't have language for, so it's hard to describe. But many people I know who dance tango have talked about like sensing unseen forces as part of their movement, feeling like they're connecting across time to, you know, people who've danced since the beginning of this dance, which wasn't that long ago in the realm of human history, but that somehow opening up to this more cosmic or spiritual level crosses time and space boundaries. Well, I just think I have one more thing I'll say, and that's relating this to being in a tango community, and aside from being an individual, looking for a place to go dance. I've had a lot of struggles with looking for communities where I feel like I'm dancing with kindred spirits. And it's really clear to me that where I started as a beginner, I've only been dancing for 5 years, there was a lot of bonding amongst the people I learned with, because we were all learning at that sort of personal mechanical level at first, just how to blunder through and learn the language so that then we could really embody the movement patterns we communicate with in this dance. And that once I had the basics down, I realized there were things I valued about the dance that just weren't happening in the community where I was learning the dance. And since I had the ability then to go out looking in other communities, I could go exploring for people who also had the sense that their tango was more of a meditative process, or it was a perceptual exploration, and and not just an excuse to get dressed up and do some fancy moves on Saturday night. I wasn't looking for that. So realizing that putting this into language allowed me to find people who were dancing for different reasons. And unfortunately, I live in a very small place. I have to travel to get to these people, but it's been interesting finding them. And I found them in pockets in my own state. I've traveled elsewhere to meet with them. I actually had my first tango dance in Germany. I was teaching a continuum class in Germany, and there was a tango teacher in the group who came up to me and said, all of the language you use when you're speaking about continuum or osteopathy it's the same language I use when I teach tango. So I knew nothing about it at that point, and he offered to teach a class. So he taught a class for our group, and he used the words I'd been using all week to both explore in our own bodies and to learn how to explore in other people's bodies. So that was very exciting. And then we danced, and it was amazing. So my first experience of tango was somewhere between the biological and the cosmic. And I feel like I've been looking for that ever since. And luckily I found it in some places, but I feel like that's the path I'm on with this dance, looking for a community of like-minded individuals who want to expand the exploration of what this dance can mean.
Your first introduction being from somebody that is, coming to you for an embodied practice and a deeper inquiry, and then exposing you to tango, allowed you to, sounds like, give you that essence that we so often are looking for in tango, that shows up in little unsuspecting places with unsuspecting people. And what a gift as a brand new beginner to have that experience. I imagine that gave you the desire to learn more.
It did. Yeah.
When other people would maybe come to tango and they would be frustrated because their physical body, maybe approaching it a little bit more from the personal realm, isn't adept in the movement or the skill, could get really frustrated and possibly not want to continue because they never feel like they're ever going to get to that place, since it's a long journey.
Right. So my very first experience had nothing to do with technique. I mean, the way the class went, and this was a group of body workers of different varieties, and we were, one of the ways I was working with them was first in their own body to sense the shape of the space that their body inhabited and to feel it change. Like, for example, when, if you put your hands on the sides, on your chest or the sides of your rib cage, and feel yourself breathe, you can think about a lot of different things there, but I asked them to just feel the change of the shape that their body lived in when they were breathing. And then we worked with the change of the shape of space. And then at a certain point, we paired up with partners, and they were working on sensing things in other people's bodies. And rather than going into the details of, how to feel, the spine or a liver, I just had them feel the change of the shape of the space between their two hands. And this turns out to be the way he teaches tango. So we had a class where I got to dance with the teacher, and he said, well, you already know about sensing the change of shape of space. Well, just listen to how I'm changing the shape of the space and do what you can to follow along and be with me. And it was amazing. He didn't have to teach me how to do an ocho or the proper way of walking. I mean, we didn't have to get into any of that. I just, so I saw the potential in just opening up the perceptual field and feeling the dance as an invitation to enter the shape of someone else's space, or to, to co-create the shape of a space and to invite each other in and out of it. And that introduction that I had to the dance was so different than, unfortunately, than so many of the tango situations I've been in since then. So
reminds me of something that a student had said to me just yesterday at a practica. And she says, those two, it looks like they dance together a lot because they look so comfortable. And it is true, they do dance together a lot, but I felt very comfortable with people I've never met, and dancing for the first time. I imagine, because I approach it much like you do, is I'm a human being interacting with a human being. How can I expand my perception and feel this mutual embrace and move?
I think that changes everything. And I think the people who don't, I think there are people like us who long for that. And I think if people knew that that existed, they might long for that too. So I've done my best to share my experience with people to try to inspire them to want to explore this way. And what I realize is there are plenty of people who they need the safety of the specifics of, I'm going to do an ocho, and then I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and that's the sequence I like to do. And so to me, that's just a whole different activity. Yeah.
There's a sense of vulnerability when you're listening, because it's the unknown. You don't know what's going to show.
Right, absolutely. It's completely based on the ability to be, and do you have to be, I don't know that you even have to be comfortable with the unknown. You just have to be willing to be vulnerable to it. So, which is what frightens a lot of people into not dancing tango in the first place. It's just it's too much unknown. And even for leaders, because leaders can lead something and they have no idea how their lead will be received, and they have to be there every moment, changing. One of my teachers calls it lead, follow, 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 follow. An awful lot of following happens before something new gets led again.
You saying that, it makes me think, like, I wonder if I've scared off a lot of my friends that I've talked about tango to, because they're like, oh no, I'm not going there.
I bet you have. And and then it's interesting to think back historically to how this all began, and to think about this group of people that were thrown together from many different countries, and they didn't have a common language to speak. So there was actually less unknown on the dance floor than there probably was out in the streets. If you had, people from 3 or 4 different countries, you had an Argentinian and an Italian, and who didn't speak each other's language, that there on the dance floor, there was actually more more known. There was more in common, more connection.
You know, I've seen T-shirts that, you know, have a picture of someone meditating, and then it has a picture of two tango dancers, and it's,
Oh, I would
you know,
love to see that
meditation for
T-shirt.
two. And and I love how you had stated that in meditation you can fake it. You can fake it because you're still, you're not moving. Whatever's happening inside is happening inside. No one is privy to that. But when you're dancing, it's very obvious of what's happening, whether it's from the felt experience of the two dancers or those that are on the dance floor. I really like that. Could you speak, Bonnie, maybe to a little bit of that quality of how that can enrich our life experience through the, not just the stillness, but in the moving connection and following whatever little curiosities come up that sort of excite these impulses, and we listen and follow and keep learning and learning.
Well, I can tell you that in, not that I need scientific proof of things in life, but I can tell you one of the most exciting places in the academic scientific world right now is in the world of neuroscience, where they're realizing the incredible connections between sensing internally in the body, movement, and how that affects cognition, how that affects empathy and compassion. There's a whole conference on this subject this coming July, sponsored by Harvard, of all places, where they're going to be discussing movement and cognition. And I'll be a speaker on a panel there. So so I've been in touch with a bunch of other people who are going to be at this conference, and mindfulness itself has made it into the mainstream of academia and science, but they haven't quite taken movement seriously in most of the academic world, and it's finally starting to happen. So I've already forgotten your question, but it had something to do with movement and sensation and
Well, I absolutely love neuroscience, and I would very much be interested in what you're speaking of this conference. But maybe speak to how potent paying attention to our movements are. And I liked that you brought the empathy into it, so that feeling of another person, since we're in a dance that relates to others. It's not a solo activity.
Right. So, so it's being postulated that when we pay attention inside our own bodies, that we do so from what I like to speak of as the observer. Like, I have an observer that lives in a place of clear awareness, and I bring information into that place. So I can bring information in from the outer world, from another person, or from my own body. So in a way, sensing your own body uses the same neural circuitry of sensing another, because you're sensing yourself as if yourself is another that you can perceive from this clear observer who, you know, lives somewhere in your perceptual field. So I believe that anyone who has a practice where they're sensing what's going on in their own body is simultaneously practicing the same neurological skills they need to relate to another person. So by cultivating, and the term is called interoception, that's sensing, that's perception of what's happening inside of your body, as opposed to exteroception, sensing things from the outside world. So when you sense things from inside your body, it strengthens your ability to sense something in another person. So it strengthens empathy. but you can be empathetic without being compassionate. So compassionate, developing compassion is kind of the next step when your empathy connects to the bigger picture. So when you begin to cultivate a sense of kindness and caring for that cosmic realm, the environment, the whole, a sense of caring for the whole world, it's not so much about the individual, and it's about a deeper sense of kindness and caring. So I think in the dance, we have an opportunity to cultivate what we're feeling in our own bodies, to strengthen our ability to feel what's going on in the person's body we're dancing with, and that can transcend the two of us and make the world a better place if that experience of sensing ourselves and sensing another allows us to develop compassion for the state of the whole world. So I love it when something I do for fun is also a radical political act. So when I'm committed to dancing on this level, I'm not just going out to have fun on Saturday night, I'm going out to change the world, and I'm doing it one dance at a time, because the dance becomes a microcosm for how I want to live in the world.
Yes.
And that brings a whole other slew of social issues up that go on in tango communities.
Could you speak to that just briefly, of kind of what those bring up in social communities?
I understand in any community of dancers, it's important for some people to have boundaries and to say, there's some people I dance with and there's some people I don't dance with. I personally have some people I can't dance with because physically I'm afraid of being hurt, and I've been hurt by someone who wasn't able to sense the limits of my ability to move. And then there are people, it's easy to dance with people you like. And then I think, well, I want to live in a world where I coexist peacefully with people for whatever reason I don't like. So as long as a person seems safe to me, if I don't like them, well, how do I do this really intimate dance with them and walk the walk of I want to be able to live next door to someone I disagree with or don't particularly like and have a peaceful coexistence. So sometimes I'll just practice my own ability to connect with another human being and have it not be so personal. Just, fellow traveler on the path, I wish you well. Let's have a little dance to celebrate life on the planet together and move on. And I don't have to like the person, or I don't have to have judgmental thoughts about what the dance was like, how they dance, or how I wish they would be, or how I wish I could be with someone else. It's just, let me just be with the moment and accept it as is, non-judgmentally, as a gesture of peace in the world and coexistence. So so I think for a community to be cohesive, people have to be willing to do a certain amount of that. And in some communities that happens, and in some communities, who dances with who gets very splintered and very hierarchical and very judgmental. And in communities where that struggle happens, sometimes I'll show up, I'll just go as far as I can comfortably, and then just move on.
And that's a larger problem in the smaller communities, certainly, where there's not a lot of dancers.
Yeah, I live in a small community, and it's a problem here.
Yeah, I experience, in other communities and in my own, that there's those that are very clear about who they want to dance with for their own, whether it be safety or sustainability in their dance, because they
Right.
want to be able to enjoy it for a long period of time.
Right.
And there's those that have never even experienced, I think, or had very small tastes of that cosmic realm or that biological realm. And so they don't know how to discern what's really safe or not. What would you recommend for someone in that case, or a teacher that wants to help people begin to understand those, that there's other ways of looking at it instead of just defending yourself against the, slot you somewhere, but that there's the potential for them to be listened to?
That's a great question. And I teach this in other contexts, but not being a tango teacher, I'm not quite sure what to say. But I think even at a really elementary level, entry level for dancers, I think there are exercises in listening where people can start getting a sense of the connection that's possible in the dance when they're not dancing. I think early on, people are so overwhelmed with how much technique they have to learn. So I think it's great. It's great in a class, even for people who are more experienced, to just, put the technique aside and the learning of new and more complicated steps aside, and do some deeper listening on different levels. So if people don't get what this is from somewhere else in their life, I think there's probably some way through different exercises in a class or in a practica to give people the sense of connection without having to be a proficient dancer already.
When it seems to come back to, setting the stage and giving people the opportunity to inquire inward to see what's happening in their own body, which then allows for more sensitivity and understanding of what's happening elsewhere.
Absolutely. I see everything else I'm involved with in the world always begins with checking in with my own breath, having a sense of what's going on in my body, how am I feeling, what am I bringing to the dance here? Am I bringing some baggage that somebody else is going to feel, and how do I be responsible for my, what I'm bringing onto the dance floor? So I always start with myself. So I think bringing into people's awareness something as simple as just feeling their own breath before they dance. So many times I've had partners on the dance floor and I've just said, it feels like you're not breathing, or is everything okay? And frequently the other person, laughs and admits that they're nervous, and we both have a good laugh about it. And then sometimes I encourage my partner, well, let's just take a breath together, and not before we dance. I love when, as a follower, someone asks me to dance, especially if I've never danced with them before. We establish a starting embrace, and we don't move for a long time. First time that happened to me on the dance floor, I was in heaven. I think it was probably half the song. We just stood there. And there was a little shifting of weight from one foot to another. There was a little cross-body movement with each other, but we didn't go anywhere. And when it was over, I thought it was one of the best dances I'd ever had. And just because the connection was so profound. I mean, we didn't have to do that much. So, so encouraging to check in with one's own body and to do very little with another person until you know that you can feel them. That seems like it would be a great thing to incorporate into your teaching.
The whole dynamics again are taken as you're speaking about the couple dancing and joining together and having this dialogue, the individual having this internal dialogue with themselves, and the couple having this relationship and communication with the ronda, with the whole dance floor.
Yeah.
So it's all basically a continuous inquiry, moment to moment, both in microcosm and as a macrocosm. And as you had stated, that you look through these lenses in your life, through every part of your world, and tango is just another one of those places that we can make most of what we learn on the dance floor and implement it and let it feed into our lives. So I think an interesting question, Bonnie, is, how has tango shaped or shifted some of what you have already that you've done before you started tango, and added to the textures of the things that you do in your life?
Interesting question. Since I came to tango somewhat later in life than average, I'm 61. I've been dancing for 5 years. There's definitely a lot of personal material that came up at first, which in the rest of my life I could ignore or put aside. And since it's not easy to hide in a social dance, I felt like, okay, here's my chance to just face whatever this self-consciousness is and get over it and move on. Like, I want to enjoy this, and I can't enjoy this if I'm going to be stuck in, some old story I have about myself. So I feel like initially there was a huge burst of personal growth in that personal biography kind of way. But I already knew about that biological realm, and I wanted to get there so badly that I felt like certain things that could take years of psychotherapy just lost their charge, because it seemed irrelevant. I saw how it was getting so much in my way, and I just let go of it. But since I was developing a whole other level of perception on the dance floor, I feel like it also brought up a lot of perceptions that I was then more sensitive to. So as I've discovered, there's certain places you don't go to dance if you're a 61-year-old woman. And while at first I was shocked at how awkward that was at first, I get that that's how the world is. And if there's a place where young people go to dance and they want to meet each other, I don't need to be there to be treated differently than a woman 30 years younger than me would be treated on the dance floor. So I feel like there were certain things I became sensitive to, but then let go of, because it was obvious that it was a dead end. There's no way to make the world be interested in postmenopausal women the way the world is interested in younger women. And so I just had to find a community of dancers that were or older where that was less of an issue. And I found that, and it's really delightful to go into a group of older dancers. And although part of me would love to be in a group that's very mixed age-wise, there's something about this dance that I have just accepted in our culture. It tends to not happen that often. Once again, I think I've gone off on a tangent and I've lost the question. Oh, how has tango served me in the rest of my life? Well, I can also tell you one of my personal reasons for starting into this dance was related to a pretty serious health crisis in my life. In 2009, I was diagnosed with breast cancer that had already spread to my bones. And I was not expected to live for much more than a year. It was so aggressive and I was so sick at the time. And I did have an interesting afternoon where I was lying in bed contemplating, not living much longer while listening to music. And I had this Pandora station playing that, randomly threw in unexpected music. And the song that came on was Astor Piazzolla's Oblivion. And there I was in my Oblivion moment, so moved by this music. I said to myself, if I live through this ordeal, I'm going to learn how to dance to that. So it became like a challenge of my coexistence with cancer to dance tango. I couldn't lift my right arm. And it was almost 2.5 years into dancing before I could hold my right arm up as a follower and not have to rely on the leader to help me hold my arm up. So I started dancing with quite a challenge there, but it became part of my medicine. I felt like the life force showed up when that music came on in a way that it didn't in my daily life. And I'm blessed to have an amazing partner who at first agreed to come along with me because he wanted to be supportive. And at a certain point, I think he became more obsessed than I did with learning the dance. And so it's been an amazing way for the two of us to be more bonded and connected and intimate while going through really serious illness. And here I am more than 8 years later, and I'm still alive and dancing. So that's a pretty huge role that it's had in my life. And although I've been a movement explorer all my life, I've been very serious about it. Like, if I did yoga, it was serious. If I did Tai Chi, it was serious. I've never identified as a dancer. I was judgmental about it being frivolous somehow. So it was great at this point in my life to be, ill and now over 60 and to realize how much pleasure there is in the fun of it. And, I can be serious about having fun dancing because that's something I didn't get to experience when I was young and I had a young body that could experience it in that way. So that's also an interesting emotion. There's so much sadness in tango music. I feel like there's a lot of sadness and grief and loss in my own life. And it's kind of a beautiful way to tap into that emotion and just move with it rather than be oppressed or depressed by it. So I love the opportunity to to move with the sadness.
Wonderful, Bonnie. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. So, I mean, all in all, I've gained a lot more than I've lost here, but it's just interesting to me that this dance showed up at this point in my life. It also surprised me that I became interested in something that had such a specific form. Like there's part of me that has lost interest over the years in yoga, Tai Chi, things that have very specific form. And I've drawn to Continuum because of its lack of form, because of the unchoreographed character of the movement of water in the universe. But there's a lot of different ways to explore that. And I realized once I learned the basics of this dance, that it was basically like, it was no different than wanting to have a drink of water out of a glass. You know, you can be thirsty for water, but if you don't have a container to drink it out of, it's hard to take it in. You know, you can stick your face in a stream or you can stick your mouth under a faucet. It's difficult to drink water without a container. So when I started to view tango as a container, that I could be fluid and explore the change of shape of space inside, I no longer felt trapped by its form. And I thought that was a lesson that was interesting, that applies to a lot of life, because there are a lot of places in life where I rebel against rules or too much structure or form. And I feel like tango has given me an opportunity to see, well, you know, where's the part of the container that I value and how can I be fluid inside that container? So it's really helped me in that way.
And if we kind of take that into the dance itself, the codes kind of create that, you know, whether it's the structure of the dance that we've learned, the technique, the embrace, the codes, all of that gives us the structure. So we know where we're playing. It gives us then the freedom to express in that realm. Thank you, Bonnie. That's quite profound. You know, you sharing your experience. I really appreciate you being so open about your experience in that way. And from your story, your entrance into tango came from a very body-aware place and from the music. So it sounds like you just entered into those magical and cosmic realms to tango, and that seemed to just open you up for that instant connection, you know.
Yeah, I think so. And I entered through those realms, and in the personal realm, I was somewhat disabled. So it was interesting being so physically challenged. In some ways, it gave me more freedom because I didn't have an expectation that I would ever be able to do anything that you would think you're supposed to do with your right arm as a follower. And yet the container gave me an ability to build up the strength and the flexibility to do so. And I mean, I've completely regained my, you know, my whole range of motion. It's so, and somewhere in there, more in the beginning than now, I was fairly committed to learning how to lead. So my husband and I both lead and follow. I have to say he's a much better follower than I am a leader. And those are two really completely different realms. If I had a larger community and a more regular opportunity to dance, I would still be pursuing that. But I felt at a certain point I had to put my leading on a pause to become more fluid as a follower. And so I hope someday to return to that. But it changing roles took a lot of things that I thought about the dance, and and changed my mind about it. So and going into my education as a leader and trying to be as fluid as possible in that role was definitely an interesting challenge.
Again, another perception, to be able to view the dance and life through as you take on different roles and approach from different aspects and places.
Right. And although I in most of my life I'm quite the leader, it was really interesting to see how certain aspects of leading in the dance surprised me as being difficult. So so I'm still waiting for an opportunity for that to come up again. And my husband for a while had a dance partner as a follower. He danced an hour a week with someone as a follower. So and that had a really interesting influence on our relationship, just switching roles and dancing with both each other or other people in the opposite role.
I think that's a wonderful thing. So Bonnie, I'm going to have you pause that thought, because I think that's going to be my little extra. I want to ask a little bit about that in our little bonus question.
Okay, great.
So I want to kind of wrap up our little discussion here, you know, just in gratitude of you sharing these many layers that both our own self-inquiry can give us, and the different ways in which we can look at tango and the roles within tango, and how we can bring that into our social relating, how it doesn't have to be just about liking a person. It really is about connecting to someone as a human being and allowing that to be how we communicate. So I really appreciate all of your wisdom in that realm. I certainly learned a lot here today. And I was so excited to start our conversation that I forgot to ask exactly where you are in the world, because I want to mark it on my map so that we can track all of our cultural places.
So I am in Burlington, Vermont, 90 miles from the Canadian border.
Excellent. And where did you culturally grow up, Bonnie? Did you grow up in that area?
Oh, no, I didn't. I've only lived here for 5 years. I actually grew up in Miami. My parents were pioneers from Philadelphia in the 50s. It was one of the great frontiers in the 1950s. So I grew up in Miami. I've lived in New York City, and I've lived in Santa Cruz, California. So as you see, I stick to the edges of the country. I have not lived in the middle.
And are there any other places in the world that have culturally influenced you that add to the place in which you kind of look at the world through?
I'm not sure that there is. I haven't spent a tremendous amount of time outside of the country. Most of the time I've spent traveling outside of the United States has been to teach. And I ended up in an environment where whatever the culture I was in, it constellated around what it was that I was teaching. So hence the tango teacher in a class in Germany.
There you go.
Yeah, so I can't say that I have deep influences from other parts of the world from personal experience.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Yeah.
So again, thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and, wrap this up. I send you a big kiss. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing generously with us. And we will certainly, when we bring your interview out, we'll state all of the different places that people can find you and how they can. And if you'd like to even tell us a little bit about that now, please feel free.
Well, since it's unexpected where to find me in the tango world, the other places people will find me if they want to hear about these concepts in terms of exploring embodiment are at the Kripalu Center for Yoga and Health in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. I teach a workshop there once or twice a year. It's usually 5 or 6 days long. I'll be there next January. Oh, this will be aired after that. So I'm not sure when I'll be there after that. I'll be teaching this year in North Carolina and taking this 3 anatomies idea into an exploration of the heart. So I'm teaching a 4-day workshop called the 3 anatomies of the heart. It's a continuum workshop, and that information's all on my website. And I have a website and a blog where I ponder philosophical things and list all of the places I'm teaching. And I have a book called Engaging the Movement of Life, which may not speak about tango, but it speaks about pretty much everything we've touched on here today in terms of movement and sensing and expanding our perceptual inquiry into, being an embodied human in this world.
Great. Thank you so much, Bonnie. Again.
Well, thank you for organizing this and for listening and for reflecting with such great questions. I appreciate it greatly.
Well, this is a shared conversation, and I'm so to have had the opportunity to share it with you. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay.